Okay, so I want to talk about iPads real quick, mainly because they're literally one of my favorite pieces of tech of all time. And it actually doesn't matter what iPad it is. It could be the iPad mini, which I'm a bit of a fanboy for the iPad mini. It could be the new M4 iPad Air that I'm actually reviewing today, or it could be something crazy like the iPad Pro. Doesn't really matter. But for me, honestly, the iPads are just such a happy middle ground for being an absolute powerhouse of a system in general. Or otherwise, it can be sort of like an entire computer replacement if you want it to be, or even something a little bit more simple, like just how you watch shows, movies, or take notes, whatever the case is. They're just a happy medium between all of those. The thing too, at least what makes this M4 Air a little bit more special for me, at least, is despite it being sort of smack center in Apple's lineup, it actually ends up striking the perfect balance of, I don't know, like usability and power all at the same time without really jumping way up to the Pro lineup. And that isn't to say this thing isn't expensive, because it's still 700 bucks. But for myself, at least, the 11-inch size does end up being a solid option. And so far, with my time having spent with it, it's actually pretty damn impressive. Now, the balance of portability and performance and all that, it's kind of wild to me, because this is effectively just a thin slab of glass and metal, and it not only can it just be a tablet on its own, which is awesome, but depending on who you are, it can also be the system you edit your videos on or photos. You can play games on it, and really just so much in general, which is probably the reason why people end up owning both, like a Mac. They might have an iPhone or Android, and they'll still have an iPad on the side just because of its versatility. And while this iPad Air definitely has less usability compared to something like the iPad Pro, on paper at least, they're actually a lot closer than you might think, and it's hard not to love how well this thing does day to day. Now, I'll say as well, I might be a little bit biased towards how I view tablets, because I use them a lot. I just specifically use iPads a ton, and it might sound like me sort of fanboying more so than a review, but there's simply no part of my personal day-to-day where I'm not using an iPad multiple times an hour. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I find myself rather, I don't know, productive, I guess, and iPads are a huge part of that. But I also use iPads a lot for rest and relaxation. So that's where, again, it's just covering a lot of my bases. And honestly, of course, on this channel, I don't talk about any sort of benchmarks or specs. So if you're here for that, I'm just gonna leave a link to the spec sheet down below. I don't review benchmarks or any of that stuff. I just review sort of from the perspective of the everyday user and experience, at least. Now, I realize a lot of people might not fall into this category, to be completely honest, but I use a dumb phone as my sort of main phone on the regular daily. So I end up using my iPad a ton to sort of stay connected to the modern world, whether that be my music apps, emails if I have to, two-factor authentication. And of course, I'm a dad, so I got those kids with all these daycare and school applications that I need access for on the daily, not to mention everything I use for my day job. So I've been leaning heavily onto the M4 Air over the last while, and it hasn't let me down as of yet. And something just a little bit more special to me, at least, is the fact that I deliberately choose an iPad as my sort of go-to piece of tech whenever I want to decompress and chill out and relax. And it simply does a damn good job. So whenever I give myself permission to do that, I'm typically reaching for my M4 iPad Air. Right now, at least. Now, wildly enough, while I can definitely, just chill out and relax on something like my MacBook Air or the MacBook Neo or whatever else, since those will obviously still have all of the same entertainment functions and stuff, but for myself, it's going to be coming down to the sheer portability and size of the iPad in general. It's also easy to get used to tablets in general just being so thin and portable, as they're sort of meant to be, but Apple does a great job with their tablets and sort of the build and quality, and that's no surprise really for anybody. And it's not like other tablets don't exist that aren't well built. It's just hard not to ignore the solid, build of an iPad in general. Honestly, these just feel great in hands, and it's just a small thing like having a centered camera if you're going on FaceTime or whatever else. And then of course Touch ID, and obviously it's just a sleek, tiny tablet. Now quickly, even without Moft sponsoring this portion of today's video, I would actually already be talking about them. And particularly, I've been using their dynamic Folio for years already. You might have seen that in a lot of my different iPad videos. Now for me at least, this ends up being a literal all-in-one type folio, regardless of what I'm personally doing. Again, whether that's going to be reading, watching media, editing some content on Final Cut, note-taking, even coloring, which I got into. I'll sort of talk about that a bit. And what makes this a little bit more unique than a regular folio, at least, really comes down to the origami style design on here, which ends up giving you multiple angles depending on your use case for the day. Now, similar to reading, my comment section got me into anime, and recently I've been watching a lot of My Hero Academia, and it's been easy to sort of prop this thing up in the theater mode, which does bring it higher up in view, which is perfect since I only really ever use one monitor in my desk setup, or otherwise I can always just pair this with my MacBook for a second display right on the go. Otherwise, of course, when I am coloring, I can naturally keep it folded and flat on my lap or desk, or sort of prop it up in the creation mode, which is something I like to use for working on my thumbnails specifically. And even then, I can sort of take that a step further with a dual screen mode if I'm sort of referencing something for a thumbnail. Luckily as well, there is a portrait angle here if you're a reader like myself. It's good if you're going to be catching up any sort of web pages or vertical media. Otherwise, if you're just keeping it a little bit more simple, you can just sort of prop this up on your lap at a 25-degree angle if you're sketching or something. And similar to the iPad being versatile, this Folio is as well. If you do want to get it separately as well, the Apple Pencil can be more secure on here if you choose the magnetic pencil holder, since we all know how easy it is for these Apple Pencils to fall off. Plus, it can double as a ruler if you really need it to. Between the soft vegan leather finish and all the different angles, this does end up being my main Folio that I typically go to. And even compared to the previous version, they have added some reinforced corners here for some job protection. If you do want to check this out, I will have a link down below. And thanks again to Moft for sponsoring a portion of today's video. Now, like I mentioned, my favorite iPad of all time still remains the iPad mini. I think this is the iPad mini 7 generation. And I flippin' love that thing. My dream, actually, having been using the M4 Air for a bit, is that I honestly just wish they'd remake this with the M4 chip or something similar. This is a powerful as hell tablet, but it's hard not to see the benefits of using something like the M4 Air. And I will talk more about performance and stuff. And of course, while it's definitely late to talk about New Year's resolutions, being that we're in flippin' April at this point, my resolution has simply been to sort of slow down, relax, and not work myself into oblivion. And again, having an iPad as my go-to piece of tech for that sort of relaxation period is a massive thing for me personally. I think it comes down to something that the iPads are just simply so accessible. You can put it down, pick it up, you can have it in, you know, a Folio or not, you can just sort of hold it in your hand, and I just really dig that. I can also say I've also become a huge reader over the last year and a half because of you guys literally in the comment sections got me into reading. I never thought that would be a thing, but my comment section on a YouTube channel got me into a reading. And now I'm like a religious reader. Like I read literally every single day now, which is wacky to say. Right now, I'm making my way through Dungeon Crawler Carl, which was a recommendation in the comments, of course. And as much as I love to buy and read my books physically, I read on my iPad a ton, like a lot. And I love the sort of book reading goals they have on there. The Apple Book app is actually pretty damn decent. So I really dig that. And Dungeon Crawler Carl, mind you, is megalithlically amazing. If you haven't read it yet, it's a damn good book. Thank you for the suggestion. If you guys have any more book suggestions, what I should read after Dungeon Crawler, let me know in the comments, please. You guys are throwing me bangers after bangers, so I appreciate that. Now, talking about Apple Pencils and how easily they seem to lovingly fall off, I flippin' love the Apple Pencil, and in general, this adds a huge level of functionality to pretty much any and every iPad. And most of the recent iPads, at least, all work with the Apple Pencil Pro 2, I think it is. This has all the barrel rolling and touch sensitivity and all that fun stuff. But as somebody who just writes a lot with pen or pencil on paper, the Apple Pencil on the M4 Air is literally a key feature for me that I use many times an hour. I even have these ridiculously expensive, I write so much, I have these expensive pencils from Grove made because I literally just love writing. And even all of my YouTube videos, I actually write them typically by hand. I have like a jot version or template of my YouTube videos when I want to talk about them. And then I actually use my Apple Pencil and I write them into my iPad, which is kind of redundant, I guess. That's just how I digitize it. I really am one of those people that will always have one of the paper-like screen protectors on my tablet. And there really is a ton of them on Amazon and stuff. And the paper-like one is the most expensive, but I actually prefer how it feels. And it does make a good difference to my iPad experience. Plus, as with any Apple product, the continuity between Mac, iPad, and iPhone really is just sort of unmatched when it comes down to even my handwritten notes. Apart from reading as well, I ended up getting into flipping coloring last year as well, around the same time actually. So I feel like I'm 12, I'm reading flipping Harry Potter and coloring books, but I just grab a PDF online for free. There's a million of them out there. And I just color while watching some shows or whatever the case. I could just be vibing out the music and I'll just color because it's relaxing. And again, that's just something that I really dig about the Apple Pencil Pro. It makes that pretty easy. Now, as an iPad mini fanboy, honestly, despite the size and weight of this iPad Air, they did a damn good job keeping this thing sort of balanced between thin and light as well, considering how powerful this thing is. And I have to say, it is really, I don't know, impressive how much power they've sort of shoved into these tablets now. For example, as a creator, this thing literally just crushes in something like Final Cut Pro, if that's something that you're into, when it comes down to any sort of content creation at all. And it's just bonkers that I can sort of take the footage from my professional camera with the highest grade quality footage and just toss it into Final Cut Pro, and it just doesn't skip a beat. It's phenomenal that this is a tablet that can do that. In my daily workflows, whenever I am typically editing any sort of vertical content, for example, I like to just use Final Cut because it's quick, it's easy, my turnarounds are fast as heck, and it just works on here. The barrier to entry in that case is super low. Not to mention as a gamer as well, there's just a lot of basic games you can get on here like Balatro, which is super addicting. And then of course there's a whole slew of other higher grade games if you care about them, like Red Dead Redemption, and they keep releasing other ones like Assassin's Creed and Death Stranding. And recently I totally forgot, but you can literally remote play PlayStation games on here. I'm sure you can do this with any other tablet really, but just hooking up through Bluetooth a DualSense controller for my PlayStation and playing PS5 games on here is pretty badass. Again, that's sort of coming down to the accessibility aspect of gaming. Just being able to pick up a couple minutes here, I really dig that. Now, of course, that all sounds great. All this super high performance stuff like editing and gaming, all that, but this is still a tablet for just everyday things. And needless to say, everything on here you can imagine simply flies. Opening apps is instant, navigating the UI is flawless, and there's really not much to complain about on here for anything basic. And even when it does come down to all those other things like the display, the speakers, the camera, the microphone, all those things are actually still pretty damn good. And this thing ends up being this whole package that you can hold in one hand. Of course, naturally, my 11-inch is a little bit smaller, but they do have a 13-inch if you do want to go, you know, all out on the screen size and stuff. But again, considering I'm an iPad mini diehard, the smaller, the better, I guess, for me. From a media standpoint as well, I can snag that episode of My Hero Academia or whatever else, and it just looks good on here. I don't really have any complaints. Otherwise, just catching up on some of my favorite YouTube videos is always a nice thing. The screen doesn't have any sort of fancy color gamuts or HDR brightness or stuff, but it's fine. From a media standpoint too, the speakers I can say are actually pretty damn decent on here, and they really are a good step up from my iPad mini, I can say. And likewise for those speakers, music is an absolute huge part of who I am on the regular. As somebody who collects all my vinyl records, I'm pretty much always playing music one way or another. So this does end up being a pretty solid music hub for me personally. Even if I'm not using the speakers, just AirPods connecting, love that continuity once again. And of course, while the rear camera is nothing crazy, if I'm completely honest, I'm just happy it exists for basic reference shots or otherwise, you know, scanning documents to notes or whatever else. But what I really do love on all iPads is the front-facing camera. When they came out with Center Stage, that was sort of a huge step up from previous. And I was sad not to see that on the MacBook Neo, but the M4 Air has it, which is nice. Whenever I hop on Teams calls for my day job as an accountant, I get a lot of comments on the camera, and it's just a plain old Center Stage camera on the iPad. People think it's a fancy camera, but no. Just does a damn good job and it looks good. Otherwise, of course, I place an irrational amount of value in something like FaceTime where my kids can sort of catch up with their cousins and the grandparents and all that. I love FaceTime. I love the front-facing camera, so that gets a specific shout out for me in this case. But yeah, in terms of my overall sort of accessories, again, there's the Moft Folio. I typically get a Paperlike screen protector. The Apple Pencil is a must-have for me. This really does change a lot for the iPad, but there are some other things that can sort of elevate your experience with this. Now, if you are going to be doing a sort of computer replacement setup with this iPad, you could always, you know, spring for the Magic Keyboard. And I've used the Magic Keyboard quite a bit when it comes down to something like an iPad Pro, and that really does make it similar to like I guess a MacBook experience, kind of, but not really. It's just hella expensive, so I haven't brought myself to buy it for the M4 Air because my MacBook Pro one doesn't fit this, sadly. And sort of similar to the MacBook experience, if you're going to be transferring any sort of footage, you're going to be living that dongle life. So if you need, you know, USB-A or to transfer SD card footage, dongles are going to be your best friend in that case. And I actually have a small camera sling bag incoming, which is going to be perfect for taking my iPad on the go when I'm out for shoots. I've been heading out for shoots a little bit more frequently, and having something like an iPad works perfectly when I'm on the go. Now, to round this up, a lot of this seems like me just gushing and fanboying, and just be completely plain, and if I'm honest, I kind of am. I just use the iPad way too much on the regular, and I'm just impressed with the iPad Air. The last time I used the iPad Air specifically was like 2020, 2019. So I like to see what they've done with the M4 Air. It's a solid alternative, I'd say, maybe to the MacBook Neo, but it's actually more expensive, so maybe not. I guess as a standalone tablet, the M4 iPad Air is probably the one I would recommend to anybody. Is this thing perfect though? No, it's not, if I'm completely honest. I feel like a tablet at this price point probably could have had a higher refresh rate display, as this only really goes up to like 60 hertz or something. And frankly, 128 gigs of storage on the base model is ridiculous. Something like the iPhone 17e has a base 256 gigs. So I would have loved more storage on here. Beyond that, if I'm completely honest, I think it's almost time they sort of stop putting the iPad mini as a separate and sort of tag it on to the refresh with the iPad Air, because this is kind of like the same thing. Again, my favorite thing would be the iPad mini with an M4 chip in it. That would be my favorite iPad of all time beyond the current iPad mini that I have, if that makes any sense at all. But overall, the M4 iPad Air just ticks so many boxes, and I'm not actually seeing a lot of videos about this device. I just really dig this tablet. They did a damn good job with it. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about the M4 iPad Air. I'd love to hear your comments down below. Appreciate you guys watching till the end. Until next time.